Hello, Rima. How are you? So I think let's begin. Mike, let's start with this,
Yeah, let's
right?
go.
Yes, let's go ahead. So, guys, good evening, everyone. My name is Anush Tripathi, and with me, my friend, Mr. Mike Bird, is there. So, good morning, Mike, for you. It's, I think, early morning for you. Thank you so much for connecting us early morning from Canada. So, guys, before we begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Anush Tripathi. I represent Clini India. With me, I have my friend, Mr. Mike Bird. Mike Bird is a founder of CoachOiseau, which is a career coaching firm based out in Montreal, Canada. So Mike is one of the ICEP certified coach. He provides training to a lot of fresh graduates on how they can start their career in after graduation. So I think Mike is one of the also has trained hundreds of candidates in the past couple of events. I have attended one of his event in the past, and that's how I got to know about him. So thank you so much, Mike, for accepting this invitation and helping us to understand how they can start their career. Most of the students are from Clini India. They are all participants from Clini India. I would like to take your inputs how they can explore their career in this industry. What are the different avenues are there? I mean, how they should explore. What are the things which they can do? What are the things we should not do? How employers perceive their profiles, through their CVs or LinkedIn. Maybe that will be better, Mike. Over to you, Mike. Rather than I'll taking much time. It's Saturday evening. So
Yeah, thanks so much, Anuj. I appreciate the introduction. And yes, it's amazing what the power of the internet can do in terms of getting to know a person on the other side of the world. I think that's helpful not just for what you and I have done, but for everyone who's with us today to realize that the world is really at your fingertips if you open yourself up to it. I will get to our slide deck in just a moment. I think something that's really important for everyone who's joining us to know is the fact that I love working with people who are just starting out in their career. You're going to hear a little bit about my story to understand why that is. I have a very sort of personal connection to folks in this place. I also just want to touch base on the fact that, and salute you for the fact that you have your mask on. I'm not wearing a mask simply because I'm indoors in my guest bedroom where there's not a soul around. So I highly encourage everyone to be safe out there in the world right now. It's pretty wild. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting going and engaging with a lot of people and talking about these subjects that are really critical for getting started in your career. So I think without further ado, I will get to our slide deck and you'll kind of get a sense of who I am and where I'm coming from. So I've called this turning the tables, seeing through the eyes of employers. And this is definitely the beginning of the topic. It's not the end of it. I think you're going to get a very high level and important view of a number of different elements of job search. And if you have specific questions, then I highly, highly encourage you to ask them. The goal of this webinar is not just to hear me talk for 60, 90 minutes. It's to actually engage and hear some of the questions and concerns that you might have. And just a really quick couple of notes about me. So I come from this place of in North America where I went to school, and I came out of school, university for me as a fresh graduate, and I was kind of a mess. I've become this person who loves working in the career space, and I do talk about a lot of career topics regularly. I have a podcast that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, but is really aimed at people who are in their 20s and 30s getting started or are in the early phases of their career. And then a couple of years ago, decided that I would really kind of formally take a step into the career coaching space with my company, CoachOiseau Coaching, career coaching. And just a couple of fun facts, because I am a human. I'm not just someone who is running a business. Much like Anuj or anyone else, it's always important to kind of get to know who you're really dealing with, and it's a key part of building relationships. I live in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Not sure if anyone here has been to Montreal. It's a French-speaking city in a French-speaking province in an otherwise mostly English-speaking country. I actually come originally from an athletic coaching background and have worked with a lot of athletes who are around the same age as the people in this webinar. And that's just a continuation of my story. So I love working with people who are starting out in their lives and careers. I have an experience in terms of learning another language. And so if English is not your first language and you're working in your second language or third language right now, I can really empathize with you, because I learned French, my second language, in my 20s. It's made me someone who is far more humble and curious about people from all kinds of different backgrounds. A fun fact is that when I was in university, I was a house music DJ for a brief period of time. And the last bullet point that I put there is really important because $19,000 a year is fairly close to the poverty line in a lot of Canadian cities. It's not a ton of money. And I put that stat there because it really represents the fact that I didn't know back then what I do know now. And that's a really big motivation for me, is that I understand that it can be very difficult to launch a career for a variety of reasons. But I've been there in my own way myself. And so I can really appreciate it if you're struggling right now. COVID obviously is another huge factor that's making it very difficult for a lot of young people. So I'm with you, and I want to support you in the best way that I can. So let's get into our conversation. Just a couple of things. So I'm open to hearing people in the chat. Hope we're going to kind of make sure that doesn't get too crazy, too out of hand. Anuj is going to work on that, but I encourage you guys to engage with one another. Understand that if you want to ask a direct question to me, that make sure that whatever you put in the chat is tagged with the question answer little toggle switch, to make sure that ends up in the Q&A queue box so that we can actually get to it. Otherwise, your question just kind of falls into a ton of chat comments and often gets lost. The plan is to go for about 90 minutes in total, with me speaking for about 60. And then I'll take as much Q&A as we possibly can. That's really a big thing that I enjoy and want to help you guys out with. I'm curious to know, so as we kind of get going here, I have a poll for you guys that I'd love for you to take a look at. I want to know where you guys are coming from in terms of your academic backgrounds. So love to see what people are answering to this. There we go. Lots of pharma people, about 60%. About a third of everyone who's here is in the life sciences space. And we have a little less than 10% coming from the medical background. Okay, it's evening out a little bit, about 50% in the pharma world. Okay, cool. Yeah, I knew it would be a very science-heavy crowd, and I actually come originally from a science background myself, a kinesiology background. So it's always fun to kind of talk with other science students. Okay, good to know that. And I look forward to kind of hearing some of your specific questions around the areas that you're working in. By the end of this webinar, the goal here is to have you guys understand how to build a mindset that allows you to not so much find a job, but to sell yourself for a job, to market yourself for a job more effectively. I'll get to that in a bit. Understanding what the job search process looks like from the eyes of an employer, and getting a sense, once you know that, once you know your audience, how do you optimize your LinkedIn profile? How do you optimize your resume? How do you optimize in general to make sure that you are putting yourself out there in the best way possible, and that you're conveying value to an employer as you go through the recruitment cycle, and especially in the interview setting, which is really where we have to all make sure we're presenting ourselves and our value in the best way possible. So I have another poll here for you all, and I'd love to know, I'm going to put this out for you in another actual poll. So tell me a little bit about what your biggest challenge is right now as a job seeker. And I've put in 3 different situations, but maybe your situation isn't in the group of 3. I'd love to hear, if you select other, what that looks like. So not getting calls for interviews. Yep, it's usually the most common one. About 50%. Not exactly sure what to do. That's usually number 2. That's a very big common problem. The world has come a very long way in terms of jobs in the last 150 years. It wasn't that long ago where there were really only about 100 different occupations in the world. And now we have about 10,000. So we've grown very, very quickly, and there is often paralysis by analysis. Just there's too many options for us to evaluate all of. And at some point we have to trim a list down and make a very educated guess about what we're going to do to get started in our career. But it's very normal that we don't exactly know. About 11% saying that they're not being offered jobs after interviewing. So they're getting stuck around the interview phase. But not too surprisingly, the big concern around not getting callbacks. Okay, so that usually is a marketing problem. It means that we are not differentiating ourselves in a way that makes us unique and that shows that we have enough competence, enough skill, enough expertise to be trusted to move forward in the recruitment process. So we will talk about that all in a little bit. I want to talk about the mindset first. This is really critical. I think everything sort of starts with how we think about what we're doing. A lot of the times we get stuck, and we get stuck because we don't realize how other people are blocking our progress, and it's not on purpose. A hiring manager's job is to figure out who the best candidates in a candidate pool are. If you are selling yourself as a product, think of yourself as a product, a car, a cell phone, a house, something of value, not a stick of gum. I mean, you could be a stick of gum, but I'd like to think that everyone here is definitely worth more than a stick of gum. The whole idea of around how do we market ourselves and communicate value starts to become the central conversation. And it's not so much about what do I do to find a job? It's how do I position myself to be the best candidate that I can be. In sales, the big secret to success is understanding what motivates the buyer, in this case, the employer, to be happier, to be confident, to be feeling better about themselves and what they're doing. And so our job as a candidate for a position is to understand what their need is and be in a position to offer a solution to the problem they're facing so that they feel happier, better off, more confident, profitable, all of those things that are really at the psychology of understanding sales and understanding hiring, because they are pretty much the same thing. If job search is a sales process, then it's important to keep in mind that the quantity and the quality of job leads that we have are going to be what determine a lot of our success, in addition to how well we close on those leads. So job leads, meaning what are the opportunities that are out there for me? Are there posts, job postings on the internet? Am I getting referrals into positions? We're going to talk a little bit right now about quantity and quality of job leads, and a little bit later on talking about the ability to close, which is really what we do in an interview setting. How do you get more opportunities to land a job? There's one very straightforward way, and that's apply to as many jobs as you possibly can. That's one way you can do it. But that's often not the best. It has a tendency to be kind of a low quality application. If we just send the same resume out to 300 different places, we're not actually tailoring our approach to the different employers that we could be helping. And I don't really recommend applying to hundreds and hundreds of jobs without understanding first how you can maximize each one of those opportunities. We want to maximize opportunities and increase the quality of our leads, increase the quality of our job applications. And the way that we do that is not as straightforward as the quantity question. You want to become a better and better candidate. And that means that you are becoming someone who really understands the employer that you are applying to. You understand their business, you understand their competition, you understand their industry really well. It's almost like you're already working for that company. You want to get a sense of, like, that's how well you want to know the employer before you go in and submit an application and continue the recruitment process. You want to be able to communicate your value, your ability to solve their problems now that you know them a lot better. And that is going to show up. I mean, that has a huge impact on the way that you present yourself online, in a resume, the confidence that you can bring to the interview table when you're really prepared and you really understand who you're dealing with. You want to be someone that actually other people like, in the sense that you don't have to be the world's most popular person. It's not that kind of competition. But we have to be able to like the people that we're hiring enough that we can accept their strengths and weaknesses. And if we're not someone that gets along well with others, that can sometimes be a very difficult thing to overcome, and it can be a real hurdle for us getting hired. And then this is a really, really big point at the end here, is can you generate the emotional energy? Can you actually make the hiring manager feel a certain way toward you, that they trust you enough, that they want you on their team? Because at the end of the day, we are human beings that work off of emotion. And if we cannot make people feel emotionally attached to us, we cannot get hired. It's as simple as that. I just want that to kind of land in place. I want you to realize that you have to make people feel a certain way in order for them to hire you. So know, like, and trust. I don't know how popular of a saying that is Outside of North America, this is a line that is very common in Canada and the United States to help understand the process of buying and selling. That if I wanted to go out, let's say, and buy a car, I would have to know something about the car, right? There's a brand attached to it. So Toyota, for example, I know about Toyota cars. I know the brand. It's a really reliable brand. It gets people from point A to point B. It's not the most expensive brand in the world, but it's really reliable and it gets the job done. So I know something about the brand. I like everything that brand offers to the point where I can actually trust it, and I would want to buy a Toyota if I was looking for a car. And that's the exact same thing. If you think of yourself, the job seeker, as a product, can people get to know you? Can they get to like you? And can they trust you enough to move forward? I have this saying, which is kind of fun, a little bit playful, is unless you're toilet paper, and I don't think anyone here aspires to be toilet paper, that you're not going to appeal to everyone in the way that you, who you are and the profile of skills that you have. And that's okay. You'll be rejected by a lot of people that you're not a good fit for, but ultimately you're a very good fit for someone. And that's the big thing, is you want to make sure that you're putting out a message into the world that says, I am a good fit for you, employer X, not employer A, B, C, D, E, F, understanding who would be a really good fit for you and making sure you communicate that. You don't want to be toilet paper. I just want to ask, so I'm going to go to Anuj for just a moment here and see if there are any really pressing questions. Is there anything that I've missed, or is there something that I can communicate a little bit better so far? I just want to check in with our audience today.
Thank you, Mike. I think, do we have any questions, guys? You can probably type in the chat box. Maybe we can take up some of the questions now.
All for some engagement.
Yes, exactly. You can ask Mike a lot of questions related, because he's not so old, who do not know the current situation's problem. You can ask the relevant questions, which you might be finding it very difficult at this point of time. So maybe you can just post your queries. Okay, I'm getting one question, Mike, over here, that Harpreet is asking how to build your first impression.
Yeah, I would say it starts with understanding who you are and what that first impression right now looks like. Confidence in terms of making a first impression really comes from just being clear about yourself, your values, the value that you bring to the table, and actually practicing that first impression. So whether it's telling your career story or crafting an elevator pitch and being able to hone that and speak that in front of other people, it takes practice. A first impression, it's not something that typically gets perfected overnight, but it really starts with understanding why you are a great fit for the person that you're meeting, and making sure that that belief in your good fit shows up in the first impression you're making. Yeah, it's a great question, actually.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, indeed. It's a very good, important question, because ultimately how our CVs, how our LinkedIn profile reflects, that makes a lot of difference. I'm getting a lot of questions, Mike, here. Should we take it now, or should we take it at the end of the event, maybe?
Why don't we take one more, and then we'll continue on, and we'll take the rest toward the end.
Okay, I'm getting one more question from Niranjana, but that's the latest question. Sorry, guys, if I'm missing any questions. We will take it up in the end of the event only. Niranjana is asking that how to impress the interviewer on, okay, how, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of actually questions, so it's actually slowing down.
Great.
Yeah, so how to impress the interviewer that he or she will give the job?
Yeah. Another great question, and we will talk a little bit more about that later on. I will say that from a general standpoint, the idea of impressing an interviewer comes down to understanding what their concerns are, really making sure that you have positioned yourself as someone who can solve their exact problem. They're not so much interested in you as much as they're interested in your ability to solve the issues that they are trying to solve by hiring a person, right? You being hired or being interviewed represents a business problem that they need to solve, and how well you know that problem and the solutions to it makes you a far more impressive candidate in the interview setting. Another great question.
Great. Thank you so much for taking this question. I'm getting one more question here.
Sure.
Mr. Majid Khan is asking that most of the people are talented, but they lose opportunities without able to crack the interviews. So maybe due to the confidence and all these things. So what they should do actually for them?
Yeah. So if you're losing opportunities or you're not getting interviews, there's usually some sort of a marketing problem. You're not communicating in your resume, your LinkedIn profile. You might not be getting through an applicant tracking system. So you may not be actually answering the exact requirements of a job description. That could be one thing. So to make sure that when you apply for a job, you really understand the description, and the description contains the keywords usually that the applicant tracking system is looking for. It's usually in the requirements section of the post. To make sure that your documents, your marketing documents, resume, LinkedIn are reflecting those keywords is one really important way to make sure that you're getting seen. And the other part of it is, you talk about confidence. As you write cover letters, as you write LinkedIn profiles, the about section especially, it goes back to what I was saying kind of to our first question around how solid are you in understanding your story and why you are a good fit for this person? Because the more certain you are of that, the more confident you will show up in all of these different places in the way that employers get to know you. The employer doesn't get to know you initially through the interview. They get to know you through an online presence, a marketing document like a resume, a cover letter, and you need to have the confidence in yourself to show up on those documents in order for people to realize it. Cool.
Great. Thank you so much. I think there are a lot of questions which will be answered in your presentation as well. So let's move on to the presentation, and then we can pick up some more questions by end of this event as well.
Awesome.
And one thing, maybe I'm sorry to guys, maybe because we are getting a lot of questions, we may not be able to pick up all the questions, but I'll to take up some of the questions which are common and which may be more, are sharing values for all the participants in that case. So I'm sorry if I'm not able to pick up the questions, right? So Mike, maybe we can go ahead with the presentation. Later on, we can pick up some of these questions as well.
Totally, yes. And I will make sure that we'll have plenty of time for questions in the end. So I'm looking forward. We'll do our very, very best. It's so exciting that there are so many of you here and taking this part of your career development so seriously. I give you, if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off to you because this is what helps you separate yourself from other people, is this kind of effort and understanding of the job search process. So we'll keep going. Some great questions are coming up, and I hope to keep hearing some good ones down the road. So I keep talking about personal marketing documents, right? Like, what are those fancy words meaning? So the resume, the LinkedIn profile, and the cover letter, they're marketing documents. So what that means is they are different tools that sell you to an employer. If you were to imagine yourself maybe shopping for, let's say, a house, for example, and you saw the listing for a house, it's some kind of technical document that explains all of the pluses, the minuses of what is going on in that listing. And you want to be able to communicate the information that's relevant as a job seeker to an employer. So if you're going off in your resume about, how you might have been a really good tennis player in college, instead of putting the focus on why you have a particular skill set that would be useful for the employer, you're wasting valuable space in terms of not really capitalizing on talking on relevant topics. So you really want to make sure that you're communicating in the space that you have. And in a resume, that's not a lot of space. In a cover letter, these are relatively short documents. You want to make sure that you are communicating directly to the person that you are applying to, and not 100 other employers at the same time. Why are you the special candidate for them? And just that, honestly, just that step alone can make a lot of people stand out a lot more, is if you are talking to the correct audience in the right way. They're marketing documents, but what I will also add to that little caveat is they are not the same thing. Okay, so a LinkedIn profile should not read like a resume. It should not be like, oh, here's my resume, here's my LinkedIn, copy paste. It should never be like that. They are different. So LinkedIn, it works like a bit of a search engine in that, yes, you want to have some keywords, but it also has a story element to it. Okay, so you have the ability to actually write in first person in the about section. I highly encourage that. You get to actually put yourself out there as a human being. LinkedIn is a broader space than a resume is. A resume is highly, highly targeted to the specific employer that it is going to. As of where LinkedIn, where any employer can see you, is going to be a little bit more of a broad, multiple subject document that says, hi, I'm Mike Bird. I am passionate about helping people transition into the world of work. I also come from this athletics background where I've helped a lot of other people transition through their athletic lives, et cetera, et cetera. I speak on a podcast. You can go from there. Use your own imagination to understand what are the things that make you a unique person, not just as a job candidate, but as a person. LinkedIn is a great place for communicating that. And then the resume becomes a really laser focused document that says, I am the best candidate for this position. Here's why. So yes, I talked about LinkedIn having search engine optimization features and making sure that we do have keywords in the right places, headline, about section, the actual skills section further down on a LinkedIn profile is basically a keyword bank, and you want to be ideally seeking endorsements for the keywords that are most relevant to your industry and job position that you're seeking. But yeah, it has to really paint a different kind of a picture. It has to say, I can like this person. If I'm an employer, I like this person. I would love to know a little bit more about them and potentially give them an interview based off of that. So talk about kind of how do you create a better impression through LinkedIn. So the actual photo that you use is very important. And I can tell you that about a year ago, I was using a headshot photo that was kind of me at a profile angle. So I was like turned to the side. I wasn't facing head on. And I got to tell you, I changed my photo to something that is a little bit more me, more natural. I'm looking right at the camera. I'm really smiling. That has had a huge impact on the number of people that have connected with me since then. The picture is worth 1,000 words. And I highly recommend that you get a picture that says a lot about you. Doesn't have to be professionally taken, but make sure that it is done in good light with you facing the camera, showing your face, whatever expression is most relevant to the industry that you're applying to. For me, I tend to smile quite a bit, so I make sure that that is there and is part of my personal brand. The other key areas to really put a lot of attention on, your headline is super critical, because ultimately when you go around LinkedIn and you leave comments, if you write a post, the headline is the first thing that people see after your name and headshot. And it's like leaving that little trail of information, those little breadcrumbs that lead back to you. And they have to say in a really short few words, like, who are you? Why are you someone who's kind of interesting? And why are you important in this space? So the headline, I highly recommend paying a lot of attention to that. And I'm sure there will be some questions on that later on. The about section is, I think, a really important creative part of the LinkedIn profile. That's where you get to tell your story. You get to use the word I am this, I do that. I'm really excited by these kinds of things. I'm not saying every sentence should start with the word I, but don't be afraid to make it sound like it's coming from you, because it is. The LinkedIn profile is coming from you uniquely. It's not like someone is writing a biography for you. The experience section is obviously pretty important because it does communicate kind of what your background is, and you want that to also really communicate the results that you've created in other places, as opposed to a list of job tasks and responsibilities. You want it to be more focused around results and value. The skills and endorsements section, super important, like I said, especially for the search engine optimization part of LinkedIn. And then recommendations is another social proof of your ability. It's one human saying to another human being, saying to you, I really believe in this person and I think you should take them seriously and look at hiring them. So all of those things, when you work on each one, and you don't have to get these all fixed in one shot, but always look to continually build on these sections, and it will create a better and better LinkedIn profile over time that communicates your value to employers better. Sweet. It's important to have a LinkedIn profile, but it's even more important to be able to dynamically use it. And LinkedIn is amazing. I mean, honestly, I don't know. It's almost hard to imagine how people got jobs before LinkedIn. It's a space where you can meet so many different people in different companies. You have the ability to get to know a place and a person before you ever get to meet them in person. And I highly recommend using it. The first thing I usually tell people when it comes to getting started on LinkedIn, a lot of people are a little bit scared around writing content on LinkedIn, which is understandable. In a public space that can be a little bit intimidating. The way you get started that I think is the best use of your time is to comment on people and their content, the people who are in the spaces that you want to work in, building connections with them over time, liking. And when I say comment, I'm not saying like great post, Bob, and calling it a day. Like really try and build on the conversation that's happening and see if you can add something to what the author has already put forward. The author is going to notice it. The people who are reading the post are going to notice the comment. And over time, what happens is you continue to leave your trace, your headline, your headshot, your name in all of these different places, and they all lead back to you. You want to create lots of doors on the internet for people to go through and find you. And comments, active use of LinkedIn is one really important way of doing that. Excuse me. How do you write a better resume? I mean, in broad terms, it's about understanding. I'll show you this quote actually from a good friend of mine who is in the resume writing space. Adrienne Tom is basically a resume writing specialist. She works out of Calgary, Alberta in Western Canada. Know yourself, know your audience, know what matters most. This is honestly, I couldn't put it better, so I just quoted her. You have to know what your own value is. And oftentimes we don't realize some of the things that we've been doing in our careers are actually of significant value to other people. We just don't realize that. For example, I know that with me building a podcast, I have learned how to market. I've learned how to communicate in the spoken medium. I'm a better public speaker as a result. But if I didn't think about the skills that I've gained through podcasting and I didn't put that into my resume, I'm becoming less of a candidate in the eyes of an employer. So all of the things that we do can sometimes lead to the development of skills that are valuable to employers. And we have to get to know ourselves first, actually stop and consider what are the things that we're really good at. Knowing the audience, like I said earlier, it's about understanding the employer, the industry, really like what is the exact problem that they're facing? Is it that they cannot get a drug through regulation? Is it they are not getting funding for something? All of those specific problems that an employer could face, you want to get to know them and understand how you can help solve them. That goes into the know what matters most point as well. What is the burning thing that's keeping the employer up at night? How can you fix it for them? Couple things here. So to catch an employer's attention, right, you want to speak the language of the position, and that goes back to understanding the job description. You want your resume to really answer. So, right, I'll use an example from the tech space because I do a lot of work in the IT placement space. So if I was a developer and I could write code in HTML, CSS3, JavaScript, and I was applying for a front-end developer job where those skills are really important, I want to make sure that my resume highlights those skills very, very clearly. It should be one of the first things that an employer sees, because keep in mind, it's only an average of 6 seconds that people spend reading a resume. So we have to really catch their attention. That is an important word here. Catch someone's attention early on. You want them to spend more than 6 seconds reading your resume. And so we want to make sure that everything that we do is obvious. The key value points are really obvious. Leading with results, not responsibilities or tasks. So this is where a lot of people do get stuck and they don't realize how they can quantify some of the results that they've created. I'll look to maybe take some questions on that. I don't want to get too far off on that track right now, but that is a key part of resume writing. And then making sure that things are easy to read. Oh my goodness, I see some resumes way too often that are written in multiple fonts. The type is all over the page. A date starts here on the right and ends down on the left for some reason on a lower line. You want to make sure that the person picking up your resume really can go through it and understand quickly and easily who you are. If they get confused reading the document, they're just going to throw it out and go on to the next person. I talked about if you were on the tennis team or something growing up, it might not be a relevant conversation now. It might be more relevant later on in the discussion when you're being recruited, but just understand that irrelevant information doesn't typically help your resume. When you know your employer and you know what's relevant to them, you want to focus all of the text on those kinds of things. And then, always look to answer this question. Are you the exact candidate that we are looking for in this exact job? Super critical. I would love to know, maybe this is a question we'll be able to hear about in the chat a little bit later on, to kind of hear what the biggest fear that you have when it comes to performing in an interview setting. So I won't necessarily look to that right now, but I want you guys to start thinking about, like, where am I really getting stuck when it comes to interviews? Because if you can get a sense of where you're having a problem, if you can diagnose the problem, whatever the problem is in life, you can start to find a solution for it. Right. So I've talked about this know, like, and trust process, and the interview is really all about the last two phases. This is where the interviewer, the employer, has you and your attention one-on-one or maybe in a group setting. And this is where they really get to know you as a person on a new level. And can they figure out in their minds, is this person someone that I can really believe in to do the job that I'm asking? This is the back end of know, like, and trust, the interview setting. And so if you're getting stuck in interviews, like you're getting interviews, but you're not getting job offers, you have to present yourself as a more likable, more trustworthy candidate in order for you to move forward. You want to make sure that you are basically presenting this idea that you are fully capable of answering the questions, the concerns of the employer for this role better than the next person, better than the other candidates, better than whomever they could go out and find. And sometimes, and I write this in a particular way, because sometimes an employer does not find the candidate that they believe is fully capable for the job. And so they don't hire anybody. They wait for months and months and months until they find the very best candidate who can actually answer the requirements of the role. So it's not enough to simply be the best candidate, because sometimes even being the best candidate isn't good enough. You really want to make sure that you are answering the concerns of an employer before they hire you. The other goal is to qualify the employer. So, and this is where I think a lot of people, if they can kind of understand this, they will be a lot more comfortable in an interview. You're also interviewing the employer when you are at the table with them. You want to understand, is this person who might hire me, am I a good fit to work with them? Will I appreciate this company? Do I appreciate its values? Do I align somewhat with its vision and its mission? Do I feel like I'll be excited to go to work at this place? Do I feel like they care about me? All of these are really important questions that you need to figure out for yourself. You can't just, some of these questions you won't be able to ask outright, but you have to create an impression in your mind. Is this a place that I want to go to? Am I going to be a good fit? Will it be a good fit for me? And when you keep that in mind, it means that you're no longer trying to prove yourself. When you kind of take on this mindset, it means that you are now engaging in more of a two-way conversation. The interview is not just you receiving questions and giving answers. It's more of a dialogue around understanding how you two parties, employer, employee, or job candidate, can come together and work in a way that is harmonious for both sides. And so you are there to really just answer their concerns. You've made it this far, and continue to build your value as a potential candidate, while qualifying if they are a good fit for you. So it puts a bit of pressure on the employer, let's put it that way, so that it's not all on you to prove yourself. That is the mindset that I want you to get away from. Is if you feel like you're just there to tell the world how good you are directly, it's not going to end very well most of the time. This is a key thing to keep in mind. The employer often needs you as much as you need them. So a lot of the time, job seekers, they get kind of very desperate. They feel like, I must land a job. I will say yes to the first job that I get an offer for. At the end of the day, the employer has an urgent problem, so urgent and important that they need to bring in another person to help solve it. So they're also desperate. Both sides of the table can be quite desperate. And if you can just sort of hold your desperation in check, a lot of the time you can be far more in control of the interview environment than you would have ever imagined, when you understand that they want you as much as you want them. When you keep these points in mind, so yeah, the power dynamic starts to shift. Okay, and now it's not so much the employer is not holding all of the cards. They are not, threatening necessarily to leave, and you can actually ask some really serious questions in an interview. You could do it in salary negotiation as well, which is not really the main topic of this webinar, but you start to end up in more of a two-way collaborative effort, and that is where you want to be as an interviewer. You want to take the pressure off of you and start to transfer it back onto the employer a little bit. so that they understand that if they want you, they're going to have to do some work for it. How do you communicate your value? And this is to the earlier question around how do you impress an employer without, you're not there to brag, but you're there to really tell compelling stories. So a story has a few parts. Stories are very simple things. Stories have a main character, usually a hero type character, and the hero encounters some sort of a problem and then meets some sort of person, a guide, who helps them solve that problem. Okay, in this situation, the employer is the hero. The hero, the company, the employer, they have a problem right now that they're facing. And you, by being hired, become that guide that helps them solve that problem. So can you tell a story where you helped other people solve the problems that are similar to the ones that this employer is facing? That's a big question for you. Can you tell a relevant, compelling story that allows the employer to see themselves as the winner at the end of the day, going home happy? Because if you can connect on that level, stories are very emotional ways of connecting. I mean, they've been around for thousands of years, and they're how human beings have learned for in a lot of different domains for a very, very long time. So the better you are at telling your own stories of how you solve problems relevant to an employee or an employer, that is what helps you to stand out. Here, it's a critical skill to understand in the interview setting. Remember this, the hero in the story is the employer. It's not you. When you get into the back end of an interview in person, you get a chance usually to ask questions. Hopefully there's enough time where you can ask quite a few. You might only get one or two out if the employer is busy, but this is a moment for you to really show that you've done your homework and that you are trying to understand the employer to the best of your ability. You have taken them seriously. You care about this job position. You're not just there because you need any job. You want to be in this position. And this is where you get a chance to make that last final impression by asking great questions. Excuse me just for 1 second. I'm going to have a sip of water. So seize this opportunity. The people who go into the back end of an interview and they don't have any questions to ask, they don't do anything with that opportunity, they are missing a critical chance to make that final impression that lets the employer walk away knowing, you know what, that person, we need to get them on our team. That's what it's about. So, okay, we've gone for about 45 minutes here, which is great. I'm sure maybe I've gone a little bit too quickly, and I'll find that out soon. I would love to connect with anyone here who is on the webinar. It would be a lot of fun to kind of continue this conversation on a more one-on-one level. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. That's my actual profile picture there, so you can find me quite quickly. The Career Builders podcast, I will just put something in front of you guys right now so that you can see. That's the show that I co-host, and I speak once a week on Wednesdays. It's Wednesday morning in Canada. It would be, I guess, Wednesday evening, India Standard Time. But that's where I'm at every week on the Career Builders podcast. You can also check out some resources on our website. The 6-step guide is one that I highly recommend. And feel free to reach out to me by email. It's just right there at the bottom. I'm usually very excited to chat with people who I've met in events like this. And I'd love to answer any specific questions that I don't get to in the live Q&A now. So that's all I've got. I want to say thank you so much. I give you, if you'd like, a little homework challenge to kind of continue to build your brand and get to know people. Understand that, it's all about building human connections. And so feel free to connect with me. Send me a message with what your biggest takeaway from this presentation was. I'd love to hear that. And otherwise, I thank you so much for being here. I thank you for your time, your effort, and your desire to get better. And let's get into some Q&A. Amazing.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for going through a quick how they have to plan their career. I have collected some of the questions which were quite common questions actually. And since we have a lot of queries and we are unable to take up all the questions, so I have some quick questions. Somebody was asking that how they should define their LinkedIn heading profile.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an example of any of the heading, how they should define as a fresh graduate? Because most of them are freshers and do not have much thing to mention about their profiles. So how they should do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when you don't have like 5-10 years of experience, you're not going to lead with that. You're going to instead talk about that you are either a graduate of a certain program. So maybe you have a master's of science. That in and of itself is not a great differentiating factor. So you want to add something to that. Your headline, a great headline, is usually a combination of details. So if someone was just coming out, they might have aspiring physician, aspiring emergency medicine physician with a passion for, do you have a particular kind of problem that you like to solve? Are you a clinical researcher who really focuses on maybe big pandemic type issues like what's going on right now with COVID, with an interest in helping small pharma companies or big pharma companies develop maybe vaccines? I'm just kind of trying to use examples that might be really relevant in the science space specifically, but you need to say more than just like, Masters of Science grad 2020. That in and of itself is not a very strong headline. So the more experience that you gain in your career, the more you can tap into that, and you can talk about what you've actually done or what you tend to do for people. But look back, if you're struggling to find like, what are the things that really make me unique and different, think about some of the projects or internships that you might have had. Were you part of any kind of a club or an association in university that makes your story a little bit more full and rich? So passion for leading groups of volunteers, anything like that you can think of that comes from your background can make for a better headline, and not just something that says like, hey, I'm a person on this platform, hire me. I honestly would sort of tend to steer away from saying that I'm open to opportunities in pharma, in clinical research, in whatever. I would try and make it more about, that's important to you, but that's not always important to the person who's looking to hire you. Tell the story of why you are special.
Great, Mike. Thank you so much for taking up this question.
Yeah.
I'm coming up with one more question, that what are the questions one can ask at the end of the interview maybe? Maybe sometimes interviewer do say that, okay, do you have any questions for us? Should they just say thank you, or they should come up, or do they have anything specific words for which they can probably ask?
Yeah. I definitely recommend saying thank you at some point in that period. Yes, it would be nice to just appreciate the employer's time and their effort. But that's not the only thing that I would say. So one of my favorite questions is, what's the biggest problem that your business or that your team in particular, maybe if it's a larger company, what's the biggest problem you're facing right now? What's the biggest challenge that you're trying to solve? And just kind of really get a really strong sense of like how well you like prove that you are willing to know the employer right down to the point where it's almost though they've already hired you. That's one of my favorites, and you can hear some really interesting answers. And sometimes you can actually ask that question in the middle of an interview, and you can maybe start to tailor your answers. Some other great questions can be just, around things like culture fit. Like what would you say is, what are the like 2 or 3 skills that are most critical to excelling in this kind of a role? What's the average sort of day in the life experience of someone who is just getting started here, or what would make the first 90 days in this role a success for the person who gets hired? There's a lot of things that you can ask that just demonstrate that you're truly curious about this job, that you can put forward to an employer at that point.
Thank you, Mike. I'm getting one more recent question, that how should I ask an employer what salary I'm going to get? Because as a freshers, we are hesitant. We do not know what is my potential is. And I'm asking these questions on behalf of my students, because many of them do not know what they should ask, whether they should ask less or more, or maybe the optimum one. How should they get an idea what exactly their, what offers they might be getting? It is too less, it is too more. So can we get some idea on how to ask this question?
Yeah. Okay. That in and of itself, the best way I think to actually approach the question around salary negotiation is to have the employer come forward first. You want, in a perfect world, you have them make an offer to you, and you have an idea in mind what your value is, what you would like to be paid, what you think is fair for someone coming out of school in your position. So you can do some research there. You can go to, certainly in North America, a website like Glassdoor would be a place where you could go to figure out what the common salary ranges are for certain positions, so you can understand your expectations. But understand that when an employer is asking you for, like, around the question of what do you expect as a salary, and you go out and you suggest a number, that's often a bit of a trap, in the sense that they are trying to understand, like, what is the lowest amount of money that we can give to bring this person onto our team. You ideally, what you're doing throughout the recruitment process, throughout the interviews, is increasing the amount of value that you bring in the eyes of the employer. And so if someone were to ask me, like, what is my expectation salary wise for a position, I would say something along the lines of, I'd really like to discuss this a little later on in the process. And I'd like to get a sense of what the value of this role is to you, the employer, so that at the end of the day, you can make an offer that you feel is fair. You don't want to necessarily take a salary where you feel like as soon as you start the job, you feel underpaid.
Right.
You want to be able to actually have faith in the employer, and that they are looking out for you, and that they're making a strong offer, and that they're not trying to get away with kind of ripping you off. So it's tough, because when we're just getting started, sometimes we don't feel as confident in ourselves. We have to make sure that we get some kind of an offer out there for us to accept. At the end of the day, it goes back to remembering that the employer needs you as much as you need them. True. And you have some leverage in that situation to negotiate. And I do highly recommend that people negotiate.
True. Agree. Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah.
One more question I'm coming up with. What should we say that once an employer asks that, what's your weakness? And of course, the intention is there not to mention their weakness. How should we justify this question over there?
Yeah. I think you can kind of word this in a way that doesn't sound like I'm really bad at this and that. That's not really the way I would answer that. I would rather see people go out and say something along the lines of, I could really see myself improving in this particular area. So I'll use an example from an earlier interview in my lifetime where I said, I think that I could become a better communicator to large groups, which I know that might sound kind of funny right now. We're on this webinar together, Anuj, you and me, and we have, a couple hundred people with us right now. And what do you mean you're not comfortable communicating in large groups? So it's something that if you're understanding and you're aware of, and you're doing things to get better at, to improve at. So back then, if I said, I really think I could become a better communicator to large groups. Right now, one of the things that I'm doing to address that is I've started a podcast where I'm speaking regularly, or I am interviewing people for a blog where I then go out and I answer a lot of people's questions and comments. I'm becoming someone who's a little more confident in a public space, which I think is going to make me better in this area in the long run. So you can see how it's not exactly like, I'm really bad at this and take it or leave it. You want to leave them with something that take the negative question and turn it back into a positive. Great.
So that's what you have to highlight: your strength in such a way, your weakness in such a way that it is, in a way, it's an employer's strength has to be there. Mm-hmm. So that's something which is very important. Thank you, Mike, for answering this question.
Yeah.
Somebody has asked that how to define your achievements in a profile. Let's say if it is, I don't know if this is relevant to the academic achievements or it is more of a skill set. Maybe I'm not sure what kind of intention is there, but maybe you would like to answer this question.
Yeah. So I'll try based off of what we know of the question so far. How do you quantify your achievements is a good question. So if it's academic, have you won some sort of an award? Do you have a GPA that is very, very strong? Are you part of some sort of special group within your class? I know that the school that I went to had something called the Golden Key Society, which was for the top 10% of students in the class, maybe even the top 5%. And so can you highlight some of those achievements on your resume that would be sort of on the academia side of the question? And when it comes to understanding more of like the professional experience, which understandably you might not have a lot of formal professional experience, is there something that you have done outside of the classroom? Have you been a leader of a team? Were you volunteering in a particular environment, helping people in a certain way? Like, for example, let's just say you volunteer helping people who are maybe homeless or struggling, or maybe are in a really difficult economic situation. And if that's something that you have done alongside of your studies, and you can get a sense of, have I helped hundreds of people? Have I helped thousands of people doing that? That's an actual number, like a quantified, measurable number that you can put into the resume to help paint a picture of the kind of impact that you've made, right? And you kind of said it at the beginning of our webinar today, and it was just, I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people through webinars and events like this. That's one thing that I can put in front of people. I've coached over 1,000 elite athletes, etc. Look back on what you've done and see what numbers you can attach to it, so that it's not just sort of a soft story. You want to put some hard numbers on it.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah.
When the question comes like, where do you see yourself in next 5 years? How one should evaluate themselves and put it across, like what exactly they should, because I'm not sure where will I look at myself for next 5 years. So how one should answer this question over there?
Mm-hmm.
So how they should evaluate in the interview point of view. Of course, we understand on our personal grounds, but how should we answer this to employers?
Yeah, I think this is a really important sort of two-way question that gets asked. My perspective on it is that it does show the employer how ambitious you are, how clear you are on where you want your career to go. It can be very hard to determine and figure out where you want to be in 5 years' time. I don't even know where I'm going to be next week sometimes. But so it's understandable that there's confusion around this. Honestly, go out, and if you have a clear idea of where you would like to be, I think go ahead and speak it. Understand that the employer sometimes might get a little bit scared if your vision is maybe too ambitious, too lofty. And to me, if that happens, honestly, I believe that employer is not for you. I think that's part of your process of qualifying the employer as much as it's their process qualifying you as the candidate. I don't think that there is really like a way of gaming that question at all. I think that you just have to go out and give the very best answer that you have based off of your feelings, your understanding of yourself, the life you want to live. And the more confidently you deliver that answer, the more of an impression it leaves on them. I mean, if you're unsure of your vision in life, it's going to show up in that question. So figure it out, become more confident in it. And people want to typically hire more confident people anyway. So don't be afraid to let it go once you know what it is.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The next question is, why do you want to join us? So if an employer do ask, like, why do you want to join our company? Because of course, we are targeting multiple companies, but we got an opportunity from a company. Why should I join that company? So how should we define it? Of course, for us, all the companies are good.
Yeah. So, I mean, how well do you know that company? If you can understand, if you can answer that question by saying, like, I understand that right now your company is, let's just say number 2 right now in market share in your particular industry. You guys have been working for the last 3 or 4 years to get into the top spot, capture more market share. I think that's a problem that is really compelling to me. Honestly, I would love to be able to be part of building a winner. Already this team is very competitive. It's in second place. And I just think that this is a situation where I can really help you and grow from at the same time. So I think that's one of the things that makes me a very compelling candidate in this situation, is just the idea that the timing is right for this kind of a problem to be solved. And you can go into some details as to maybe how you might help them solve it if you haven't already. But knowing the employer. So everything that I said there started with understanding the position of the employer. That tells a really strong message to the people who are interviewing you, in that they understand that you really have taken some time to care about this job. And that you're not just, you didn't take 5 seconds to understand the company. You really do care. Lots of great questions. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, we're getting a lot of questions actually, and I'm trying to combine some of the questions. I'm sorry, guys, if I'm not able to answer some of your questions, or I'm not able to pick up some of your questions. That's something which I'm sorry for that. Maybe I'm trying to connect some of the questions over here and trying to make one question out of them. Okay, so we are getting some more questions like, what if somebody would like to switch their career? Maybe I am already
Mm,
working for a domain X, or I would like to switch it to Y domain in that case. However, both domains are little relevant. Is there any way to wherein we can showcase our candidature over there?
yeah. This is where, so depending on how closely connected those domains are, you might be able to take some of your previous skills and really translate them over to the new domain. If the two domains have nothing to do with one another, then you might be in a situation where you really, really need to start leaning on relationships and building connections in that new space. That should always be a part of your job search strategy anyway. I mean, maybe I didn't talk about that enough, honestly, is the idea that you want to build relationships in the places that you want to work, whether it's in the same vertical or in a new vertical that you're transitioning to. Um, Convince people in that new space that you are someone that can be trusted in that space. So, and that might take months, honestly. That's not something that gets fixed overnight, but develop contacts in the new place. I mean, I did it, and I'll kind of just use myself quickly as an example, coming from athletics and education. I'm still in education in a way, but more specifically in the career space, I now have lots of contacts in the career development space. And it's something that takes some time, but if you're really just open to getting to know people, they understand that you're on a journey, you're transitioning. They'll often help you in that transition. Especially if you're supporting the work that they are doing, and that can really speed up the transition into a new space. I haven't always been in the career space, but my transition has been pretty fast because of the people that I've had a chance to meet. And the other thing is just really kind of going back to deepening that first point. Can you now take the skills and the experiences you have from your past, and can you change the story context a little bit? Can you rewrite it so that it's clear that you can solve a particular kind of problem in one space, and maybe you can solve a similar problem that exists in a different vertical? So it takes a bit of creativity, but it's about sort of like rebranding yourself as a job candidate, using what you already have, and then getting to know people in the places you want to be. It's a
Great,
journey. Yeah.
great, Mike. One more question I'm picking up, because many people are having there's a career gap is there because of their personal commitments. Maybe they're very good fit, they're very good candidate. Maybe once employer give them a chance, they will prove themselves. But because of their, of course, the responsibilities, family responsibilities, they are not able to serve that gap fulfill that gap due to some personal commitment. How should they define it? How should they really make a difference for the employers, or I mean, does it make a difference for the employers if there is a gap?
Yeah. I mean, it can, and it depends on the employer. Every employer is a little bit different in how they interpret a gap in your career. It's not a bad thing to put down if you have an experience section on your resume, and there's a 2 or 3 year window where you stepped away from your career, and you had to take care of a young family. It's okay to explain that, I think, personally, and put that there and realize you can use that as an opportunity to paint a picture of some of the other skills that you were able to develop. Starting a family is an amazing personal development journey. I haven't done it yet, but I know from friends, my family, it is work. It is a job. It is professional experience. You just have to translate it back into how it's relevant. Maybe it makes you a more organized person. Maybe it makes you a really, really hard driven person to create results. You'll go to no end to make sure that the job gets done. There's ways of telling that as part of your story that I think can actually really add value. But I think if you don't address it somewhere early on, you sometimes run the risk of an employer making an assumption, a negative assumption about your past and your experience that doesn't help your candidature. So I encourage people to actually speak to the gap, speak about it in your resume and your LinkedIn, and actually explain what you learned from it.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
And Lalita, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much for joining this webinar that you have so much of gap after 10 years and having kid. So thank you. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah.
I'm getting more questions like this. Somebody's asking that how one should impress employers without showing desperation towards the job. Let's say if I'm applying for a job and I'm quite keen on it, when I'm having a call with the interviewer, maybe a telephonic calls, I shouldn't sound desperate, but I should sound very keen on it. So how to differentiate between the thin line between these two as well?
Yeah. Making sure that you sound interested means keeping the focus on the employer, not on you. I mean, that's the simplest answer I think that I can give to that. When you start getting into pitch mode, you're selling yourself in a way that I'm sure we've all been around salespeople that kind of made us feel a little bit icky and gross. We didn't actually like the way they were talking to us. We want to keep the focus on the employer, and you show interest by being curious, understanding what the role really is, asking questions around it. So, I mean, if you get an initial phone call from a recruiter, you have a chance to ask some questions around maybe things like, yeah, what are the expectations for this role when it comes to something like travel? How would you describe sort of the average workday during the peak season of your business? What is what is the peak season of your business? I think it's this, but can you confirm it for me? Notice how it's all about putting the questions back onto the employer. It demonstrates that you're interested in that place. There's no question about it, without making it all about you.
Great, Mike. Thank you so much. I think this was a very important question, because every time we come across these kind of things, when we have a first round of telephonic interviews, followed by that, there's a video interviews there. So that's how it is there. One latest question, I'm getting it on my screen, that how should we answer it, that how long will you stay with us? So it's quite tricky questions, when the employer do ask an employee, the prospective employee, that how long will you stay with us? So how should we answer this?
That's a tough one, isn't it? So if you have an idea of how the employer fits into the greater arc of your career, if you say, and I honestly believe that if an employer is sitting there hoping that you say 20, 30 years, I don't know about you, but that doesn't seem, I don't see that happening very often anymore.
Yes.
And so if their expectations are wildly off, again, that's a chance for you to qualify the employer and realize that maybe this isn't a great fit. But if you get a sense of, yeah, I think this is a position where in the next 5 years, I think I'm really going to have an opportunity here to grow and contribute a lot to this organization, develop my skills, maybe as a communicator, as a leader of groups, or if you're coming from one background into another, it gives you a chance to say, I really need some time to learn and understand this industry and how I can excel in this role. So you might not give an exact number of years. You might just say, like, I know I'm going to need quite a bit of time, so I can see myself being here definitely for at least the medium term in my career as I continue to build my skills and the value that I bring. And once I see where I'm at after that, like once I see what I've become in this space, then I'll have a better idea of how long I might be here for.
Great, Mike. Thank you so much. So I'm getting a lot of questions now, actually. So thank you so much, guys, for if you are getting answers of questions. Some of questions we have skipped. I'm sorry for that, because we are not able to take up the questions. We are trying to pick up those questions which are more generalized and helping maximum number of participants as well. So I'm extremely sorry if we have skipped your questions or I missed by any chance due to the long timeline over here. Okay, so guys, do you also want Mike to take up another session on what are the do's and don'ts? Maybe how many of you are saying yes for it? Can I get in the chat box do's and don'ts in the interviews, maybe, or maybe the top 10 questions? Okay? Can I get yes or no? Do you want Mike to take up one more session on it? Because I requested Mike for the same. Maybe Mike, if you are okay, yes.
Yeah, great. Totally. Please
look at this. Can you see the timeline? Right, Mike.
I can't quite. I'm looking here. Oh, it is going so fast on my screen.
Yes, indeed. So that's what it is there. I think all are willing for one more session. Maybe
there we go. Yeah.
Yes, Mike mostly take the sessions not on the presentations. He goes more of the face-to-face discussions rather than it. So thank you so much, guys. I hope you're enjoying this session, and please post your questions. You want to join it again? Maybe Mike, we can give one more time. Maybe the other day, if you are free, maybe from your schedule. I know that your September is packed for you, but if you can allow someday as well.
I'm sure we can find a way to do it. I am seeing the timeline now, and I appreciate everyone's interest in this conversation and just so many great questions being asked today. The fact that you're asking these questions is a serious advantage for you, and that you're thinking about this in a way that's really makes you differentiate yourself from others. You're not just an average job seeker. You're someone that takes this very seriously. So I appreciate everyone who has contributed and participated today.
Thank you so much, Mike. And this is the link which I'm posted just now. Maybe you guys can subscribe this YouTube channel, and we will be posting this entire script on this video script on this YouTube channel as well. So maybe you can subscribe this. Sure, Sandeep, we will do it one more session. Thank you so much, Pratik, for this appreciation. Okay, should I take some more questions, Mike? Do we have time?
I'm good to take a few more, at least. Yeah, I think we could probably go for another several minutes. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Great. So I'm talking about some more questions. I'm getting one more question. What if there are a lot of participants are there, and recruiters do refer a lot of CVs? On what basis did you start calling up the candidates?
Like you're saying, if you're a recruiter, on what basis do you start phoning in?
Exactly. I mean, maybe once I have applied for a job, of course, there are 500 others also applied for the same job. How does the recruiter look into the profile? How does the recruiter consider, okay, this is the right candidates, 10 top candidates I can probably call upon?
Yeah. So if the recruiter is working for a really large firm or has an applicant tracking system, they're going to be putting the stack of resumes through software that basically eliminates a lot of people automatically. Usually around 75% of the candidates get missed right off the bat because the applicant tracking system doesn't find enough keywords that answer the job description that's been posted. So that's one thing. That's kind of the first hurdle that a lot of people have to go through. And so the remaining sort of 25-30% now go through more of a manual scan. And that's where we have the 6-second rule that comes into play. And let's just say 300 people have applied to a job and 75% of those get eliminated by the applicant tracking system. That means that we have 75 candidates that are left. And then from that point, you're looking at usually going from 75 to around 15, maybe 20, maybe even 10 in some cases. Everyone's going to be a bit different. But then they'll start to go through phone screens. They'll start to look at LinkedIn profiles if they haven't already. If they have a record of previous applications, they might start looking at those. So everything that an employer is going to do kind of leads them to, just does this resume really stand out in some way? Is there something that makes me feel? It's all about feeling, right? Do I feel like I want to know this person a little bit more based off of what they've presented? So that's where, right, having a resume that might look slightly different, maybe uses a little bit of color or some sort of a highlight box that communicates in a really clear, easy way. What are the top skills that I bring, the top value adds that I bring to this position? Those are some of the things that come into play once you get through the applicant tracking system, and then hopefully onto the phone screen. And that's when they're looking to now qualify things like salary expectation, which, like I said earlier, is a question you ideally want to avoid, and say I'd rather this go until we're further on in the recruitment process. And that in itself, by the way, can make you stand out.
Great, Mike. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Did I answer that question? I just want to make sure.
I don't know if the audience got the answer.
Yeah. If there's something that I can add to that, don't be afraid to let me know.
Please keep on posting your questions, guys. We are taking a few more questions, right?
Yeah.
You can take 3 to 4 more questions, maybe in the next couple of minutes time.
That works. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get one more questions for you. How should we answer? Tell me about yourself, or can you take me through your profile? Because that's, I think, a very important questions, and everybody has a different way to answer it. How Mike would like to define it if he's a recruiter, actually.
Yeah. So you want to have this question down kind of, you want to be very solid with your answer here. You want to take about 60 to 90 seconds, which isn't actually that much time if you sit down with a stopwatch and you try and measure, okay, if I talk about myself, it's pretty easy to go for minutes and minutes and minutes. You want to answer that question by, yes, you want to talk about yourself, but especially through the filter of how can I be of great service and value to this employer? So you want to touch on the really relevant things. If they're looking for someone who is coming out of school, was a very strong student, contributed in student government, let's just say, I'm someone who really is passionate about creating large scale change on sort of a political level. And then I believe in the ability of large groups to mobilize and create change across an organization, starting with one conversation at a time. And if that's kind of relevant to that particular employer, it goes back to understanding them. That's the kind of story that you want to be telling about, that says, this is who I am. At the same time, this is why I think it's helpful for you.
Great. So maybe you have to define your importance towards a specific job, how you are the right key for the right lock. Actually, that's what you have to define it over there. And maybe you can talk about your candidature, your qualifications over there. Maybe you can talk about a bit of about yourself, your name, your qualifications, and maybe your background, a little bit about your educational background. Followed by that, do not try to emphasize too many things like your hobbies, or like your not talking about their strengths and weaknesses, because I think you should give a chance to the employer to ask more questions. So that's what is my perception is there. When I interview the candidate, I always look out for these things. Actually, how do they answer? So thank you so much, Mike, for taking this question. Sometimes candidates do have a lot of confidence. They go with a lot of confidence, but the difference between the confidence and overconfidence is very thin line. And how should they balance out that thing? Maybe, being is the same question, like being keen and being too desperate.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how should they define it?
Yeah, it comes back to just where are you putting the attention in the conversation. Someone who is confident doesn't have to boast, doesn't have to make the conversation about them. They already believe in their abilities, and it's about just answering the questions of the employer so that they better understand who you are, as opposed to you having to convince them that you're a great candidate. You'll automatically start to show up as that. And so, like, how you run the conversation, how you answer questions, yes, you're going to talk about yourself in an interview, but what you really, really want to do is make sure that you are talking about maybe not so much what you have done, but the results that have been created through your work. So you might actually talk more about the work itself that you were a part of, as opposed to making yourself the main character in the story. Talk about how a past employer was facing a problem and you were able to contribute in a certain way. And the end result of that work, notice how I'm saying it's like the work, as opposed to like making it so much about me. At the end of the day, like, the work generated this kind of a result, super relevant and desirable for the employer, and putting it back out there for them to see that it's really about how you're in service to the employer.
Great, Mike. Thank you so much for taking those questions.
Yeah.
I think somebody's having questions. Okay, so I'm getting one more question, that why, if there's a gap, there's a multiple switch to the companies. Let's say if I'm working for a company A, and then after a very short span, I have joined company B. Due to certain other reasons, might be only my own concerns. How does employer perceive that? How does employer look into that?
Yeah. So, like, job hopping. I mean, job hopping, as certainly it's kind of called, very commonly in North America. So first of all, it's becoming a lot more common that people do job hop, as opposed to 10, 20, 30 years ago. People's careers looked a lot different, and there is less stability in a career path right now than there ever has been. So to some extent, I think it's fair to say that job hopping is normal, but it's important to also paint the picture. And this is, again, going back to telling a story that makes sense. Like, why are you changing all of these jobs? And I think the best way to kind of address it is if you kind of have a sense of how those jobs fit into your journey. So I really grew quickly in this particular role. After a year, there was nowhere for me to grow in the company. It just didn't have, there was nowhere on the ladder for me to go to. It was a small company, and I was looking for another opportunity. So I had to look elsewhere, and that brought me to this, let's say, employer B. So I left employer A for employer B. Employer B was really good. I was a little bit kind of caught off guard in that the job ended up not really being what I thought it would be at the end of the day. The role kind of evolved over the first 6 to 12 months. And I decided that I no longer wanted to pursue a role in that position. The employer wasn't interested in repurposing or reallocating my role. And so I again looked for another opportunity where I felt like it was a better place for me to apply my skills and my gifts. So I went to employer C. And that's the kind of story that you want to be able to find. And if you're leaving jobs really quickly because you quit jobs easily, that's a very different story. If you just you don't like it, and for the smallest reason you leave, it's pretty hard to overcome that. And so if you are afraid of becoming a job hopper that's seen as someone who is really fragile in their employment, you need to look at like, what is the reason that you find it so hard to hold a job in these positions, and start to rethink yourself in the career that you have.
Right, Mike. So I hope this answers your question. Do not try to leave jobs too early, because if you're leaving job too early, it's a long-term, bad impression about your career. So try to stick for a couple of years, I'll say. That's my personal opinion is there. Maybe I can say that you should stick at least 1 to 2 years minimum for sure. Followed by that, I mean, if there's unavoidable situations are there, I will not recommend. But if you're finding job is interesting and helping you out, I'll say stick for a while. Post that, you can look into the pros and cons, the companies, how they would like to see you growing, and accordingly you can plan out further. So that's what is my opinion is there. And I think, Irfana, we've already answered this question, guys. So any more questions are we getting? Or maybe I can, you guys can also check out more details about Mike. I'm just pushing one more notification on your screen. Hope you can see Mike on this. His podcasts are there, right? So maybe you can check out his podcasts, which are coming up on every Wednesday. You can know more about him. He talks about a lot about the freshers, how they can plan their career, how you should start your career, and what are the do's and don'ts are there globally. So maybe Mike will be able to help you out. You can get in touch with him on LinkedIn. Maybe his profile is already on the Mike. Maybe if you can just take them through your screen.
Yeah,
okay.
Totally.
Here it is. Yes. So maybe you can just copy this link. You can probably send your request to Mike. He will be definitely accepting it. Maybe you can follow him up on LinkedIn, and he can probably help you out best of his availability. I'm sure that Mike is quite busy this season. So Mike, shall we do it one more event, maybe next Saturday sometime?
I think we can plan for something. I will look at, let me get back to you. I believe we can do something,
yes,
but definitely in the near future, yes.
So with this, I think we can conclude today's event. Mike, do you have any more questions? Your message to freshers or the Clean India students, do you have any message for today evening?
Continue to get to know yourself and ask yourself questions around what are the struggles that you're having, because if you can identify patterns and where you're being held back, if you're not getting calls, it's about marketing. If you're not passing interviews, you're not telling stories that are compelling enough to employers. So really stop to think about where you are in this journey and where you need to go to get to where you want to end up.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike, for taking out time from your busy schedule. I appreciate your help. I hope students has enjoyed this session. Let me know your feedback to your relevant campuses. How did you enjoy this session? Once again, I'm sorry that if I'm not able to take up your questions, if I'm not able to answer some of your queries, or Mike is not able to answer your questions. So we are sorry for that. But due to time constraint, we have to wind up over here now. So because there's a room expiry time is also there, I think I do not want that we end up abruptly in that case. So with this, I will say goodbye, good night to all of you, and take care of yourself. Have a great weekend ahead. And anything else, Mike, should we conclude the session?
No, I'm good. I wish everyone the best of the rest of the weekend, and we'll definitely be back soon. I enjoyed this. You guys asked some great questions. I look forward to being with you guys again soon.
Perfect. I'm also pushing my website, this link to you guys. Maybe you can just follow this channel, and here you can find out the recording of this event as well. If you'll subscribe, you'll get a notification of this event as well very soon. All right. So thank you so much. Take care, and good night to all of you.